Hey everyone, we're Red Donkey Projections. I'm Eric and we have Lucas as always.
Hey everyone.
So what we're going to be talking about today is just a quick update on the polls of the 2020 presidential election. As you can see with the bolded headline, Biden does take a really significant lead because they say here that voters are rejecting Trump on virus and race. So basically the two biggest issues that we were talking about these past few weeks. And overall, this culminated to a 14-point, Lucas can highlight a 14-point lead for Joe Biden, according to the New York Times.
This came out yesterday, and we'll be taking a look at it today. With that being said, let's get right into it. Before we begin today's video, we just want to give a quick shout out to God of Politics' Discord server. Please join today because they are having a mock government system. It's a great and very fun election. You can get elected, run for a position, run for office, get elected, and then serve that position out. They have Senate open, House open, and the presidency open. So please help our friends out here. Apply in the link below and go and have some fun in God of Politics' mock government Discord server. All right, let's head back to the map. The election now, the polls. 50% for Joe Biden, 36% for Donald Trump, 14% other, which also encompasses people who will not vote or didn't know who to vote for. I don't think this is that much of a surprise here. Donald Trump is in his low point of his presidency. His approval rating is definitely really low at the moment. Relatively speaking to other presidents, about 40% right now. But it has been that way throughout his presidency. Joe Biden, this is his high point because obviously he's kind of taking advantage of what's happening in the country right now. It's two main factors: Trump's handling of coronavirus, which is viewed as being very poor, and Trump's handling of the Black Lives Matter movement, which is also being viewed as being relatively poor. So a 14-point lead shouldn't be that big of a surprise here. Obviously, polling does always sometimes, not always, most of the time it does skew to the left with factors usually that the pollster can't control, such as the shy Trump voter. So it's definitely possible that it's skewed to the left. I think someone said that to kind of adjust it, it's 3 points, swing it 3 points to the right. But 14 points is pretty big. If we're calling that between our lean, likely, and solid margins, that's within the likely characterization, which is a huge margin for Joe Biden. Now we're going to scroll down and take a look at this breakdown. How about this? How about I'll cover age. Eric, why don't you cover gender right now?
Yeah, sure. So as we can see in the first column or first row, females are definitely swinging the vote towards Biden. In general, females usually do not vote for the Republican. They do agree more with what the Democrats think and their policies. What's a bit more surprising here is the male category. Usually, males, I don't know, maybe in the middle of the country, they're usually pretty solid Republicans. And in this case, they would be in support of Donald Trump. But the males, the majority of them, do appreciate Joe Biden more than they do Donald Trump. Again, comparing to the females, not by much, but already a lead for Joe Biden for the male gender. That's very significant. That will help him a lot.
I think that's definitely really interesting to take a look at. As New York Times put it, Biden should be leading a little bit more. Trump should be leading a little bit more with the males, but that's apparently not the case from this poll. And now let's head to age. 18 to 34-year-olds, these are the younger bunch. They are voting, they are turning out for Joe Biden. No surprise here, the younger generations tend to vote more for the Democratic candidate. They're more progressive generally. Like if we saw in the Democratic primaries, we saw a lot of these younger voters, well, some of them, going out and voting for Bernie Sanders because they are more progressive. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, they do well with the younger voters. Now we have candidates like Joe Biden, a moderate, doing better with the older voters because they do go out and vote more for the moderates. So looking at this right now, 18 to 34 points makes sense here. That's pretty big lead for the younger voters. 35 to 49, again, no surprise here, 23-point lead. Now, this is kind of surprising here, kind of interesting that Donald Trump's not doing as well as he might have used to do with the older voters. Usually, older voters prefer the Republican candidate. I guess that's not what we're seeing here. We're seeing, although it is a +1, that is very narrow. And the same for the 65 and older, the older group, the older bunch here. They are also not voting as much for Trump. And I want to actually compare that to the 2016 results we have here. Let's see, age should be somewhere here. Trump led by the 65 and older by 8 points. And he led this category, 50 to 64, by 9 points. Let's compare that to what we have from the polling data here. 50 to 64. Oops, that's not what I was aiming for. Hold on. Yeah, 65 and older, 53 to 45. He's actually trailing by 2 points by Joe Biden. That's not a good sign for President Trump here. And also the 1 point lead for 50 to 64. I want to compare that as well. Why am I messing this up so badly? 50 to 64, he led by 9. Or sorry, that is 9. He led by 9. So that's a pretty big difference here. 9 and 1 point lead. I don't think that's exactly too great for him. Now, race and education, no surprise here. Joe Biden is leading African Americans by a lot.
Especially now,
Yeah, especially now. 74%. Now, comparing that to what we have here, Donald Trump got 8% of the African American vote in 2016, which is not too great. 74 is quite a bit, definitely, but it really shouldn't be that big of a surprise here. And now Hispanics, 39%. That's a pretty big lead for Joe Biden too. But we usually do see that the people of color usually do perform better. Sorry, what am I saying? The people of color usually do vote more for the Democratic candidate because they believe their beliefs a bit more. White and with a college degree, 28%. Let's compare that to 2016's results. Let's see. I'm not sure if they had it. Yes, they did. Okay. Well, they don't differentiate by. Oh, they do. Okay. White college graduates. This category was won by Trump by 4%. That's also quite a bit here. To go from 4 to 28, that's a pretty big swing to the other side. And white and no college degree, I think it also went to Trump in a pretty big margin. Let's see here. High school or less, 51 to 45. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. This one, 67 to 28. That's also a pretty big margin. Not as big as the one we have right now. 19 points is still a relatively good lead. Here, Eric, why don't you talk about this last part here?
Yeah, sure. This one's pretty straightforward. So the Democrats probably would tend to vote more for the Democrats, Joe Biden, and the Republicans tend to vote more for the Republican nominee, Donald Trump. And see, it's pretty. The numbers are the same, 85 to 85. What's a bit more important to talk about is the independents, because usually they would swing from side to side. Last year, I think, let's take a look at how the independents voted.
Yeah, hold on. Here we go. 47 to 24 for Trump.
And that may be a combination of factors of they didn't appreciate Hillary Clinton's policies, and they just like Donald Trump's policies more. Now, maybe because they've seen what he's done, maybe they don't appreciate his actual accomplishments that much as they expected. So maybe there is a bit of a shift in appreciation. And a plus 21 for the Democrats will really help Joe Biden, because these are usually undecided. And if they vote for, Joe Biden, that's going to give him a big boost. So consider consider that 106 or something, because like instead of, you know, for Joe Biden in total, you know.
Mm-hmm. Now, a point I want to make here is that in 2016, the election basically came down to the independents. Whatever the independents vote, it's probably the way the election is going to go. So if Donald Trump isn't garnering that independent vote like he did in 2016, this might cause some issues to his campaign.
Now we can move on to ideology. So we have a very liberal, somewhat moderate, and then somewhat Republican, and then very Republican. So we can see here that because Bernie Sanders has a very low chance of becoming the presumptive nominee, they have to, in quotes, work with what they have. So they are probably going to support the other next best candidate in their case. So they probably, the very liberal people do have, they do support Biden. And the same thing applies to somewhat liberal and moderate. They do also want to appreciate, and they do want to support Democratic nominee, considering that most of these people don't really like what Donald Trump is doing. So they really do want to support some of them really do want to support Biden to just get Donald Trump out of office, which is maybe why we're seeing such a spike. And now we're going on to the somewhat conservatives. It's a plus 32 and a plus 73 for very conservatives. This is Trump's a solid base. This is what's going to get him, a lot of electoral votes in the election. And, we see here more blue than red. The moderates do appreciate Joe Biden more because, they just probably don't like what Donald Trump is doing, and they align more with Joe Biden's views. And that exactly might be the difference of who wins the election, just like with the independents.
Yes, President Trump is very popular with the Republican Party, which kind of explains why he's leading so much in these two categories. Let's now head to the final graphic they have here, which shows that more voters feel strongly about President Trump than they do with former Vice President Biden. As I said before, very favorable among all registered voters, 50% here. And then we have Joe Biden, who is not as much very unfavorable as Donald Trump is. 50% is actually a lot, and that's kind of possibly because of those two things we mentioned, the Black Lives Matter movement handling and the coronavirus handling as well. He's very unpopular, clearly from non-white voters. He's doing a little bit better with the white voters, but he's still pretty unpopular compared to Joe Biden. Joe Biden's colors are not very deep yellow. He is pretty unfavorable kind of unfavorable among white voters, but obviously he does perform relatively well with the non-white voters. What I find interesting is that he does better with the older voters. That's something that we saw in the primaries, so it's not really that much of a surprise here. Now, to remind our audience, Joe Biden is pretty much more popular than Hillary Clinton was in 2016. She was pretty unpopular. She had a lot of baggage. Joe Biden people view as being a better candidate overall, which might be explaining why he has a larger lead among Donald Trump here. So essentially, if we look back at 2016, he's essentially beating Biden Biden's essentially beating Trump in nearly every category from 2016, which is really interesting to see. Although we are kind of far away from the election, anything can change, but at the moment, it looks like Biden can win. And that's the end of the video for today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this episode, please hit the like button. And if you like our content, please subscribe. We'll see you in our next episode tomorrow.
See ya.